Welcome to Politics Unplugged. I'm Ann Trujillo. Voters in Lakewood are about to decide if it's time to put a cap on construction. Is it smart planning or a disaster in the making? Cities all over Colorado are watching. Now, if passed, Lakewood Question 200 would limit housing builds to 1% of the current homes in Lakewood. So what does that mean? Well, as of 2017, there were roughly 66,000 homes in Lakewood. 1% of that, about 667, so give or take a house or 20 with growth. And that's the total number of new units that could go up yearly. Well, as you might imagine, realtors and contractors hate this idea and say it would bring business to a standstill. Locals, however, we spoke with think there's something to it.
Take a breath and let the development happen at a slower pace and let us react to it and grow with it instead of it just growing on top of us.
So in addition to that cap, larger projects would also need a stamp of approval from City Council. Joining us today are Kathy Kentner, who has spearheaded the Strategic Growth Initiative, and Bill Furman, the vice chair of Our Lakewood, a group that fears, among other things, that limiting growth could price people out of Lakewood. So thank you both for being here. Kathy, let's begin with you, because where did this idea come from? How did this come to be?
Well, I think like most initiatives and referendum and recalls, it came from years of community members going to their elected officials and letting them know that there were problems in the community. And there were unintended consequences from our new zoning ordinance, which went into effect in 2013. And from then on, from the first neighborhood at 35 Van Gordon Street, for years, neighbors were coming to council and saying, this development is going up and it is not what was intended from our new zoning ordinance, and please help us. And council was saying, we'd like to help, but there's really nothing we can do. And this was true. Part of the zoning ordinance that we have in effect, large projects are all handled administratively behind closed doors. There's no hearing, not even at the planning commission level. And so after many years, these neighborhoods got together and started gathering signatures and saying, please do something about this. If you won't, we will. And we came up with the Lakewood Strategic Growth Initiative, which puts in place a very common practice, which is a building allocation system.
All right, so Bill, let's bring you in here, because she mentioned unintended consequences. You see other unintended consequences with this initiative.
And I think the thing is, I don't even necessarily see them as unintended. I think the intent of this initiative is essentially disastrous. There's a reason there's been 5 different groups that have stood up to fight this. I'm just a part of one of those groups, a grassroots organization that is fighting with locals against this initiative, because our concern over the effects it'll have on affordable housing, low-income housing. There's other groups who are fighting it due to their concerns of the environment. There are groups fighting it because they're concerns about the impact on property rights. This has sort of a litany of problems with it, and the way it was written, it claims to do a number of things that it will not do. And beyond that, we are concerned about the idea that if this zoning ordinance change was such a big issue, we need to look at the zoning ordinance change so we can create the rules that everyone can see and understand, rather than creating a capricious system where the council votes.
Because you also talked about the council members themselves. So why is it that you can't target council members rather than the zoning issue or other issues that have come up?
Well, as I mentioned, for years, community members were coming to council, and council has been reluctant until recently to address the issue. It wasn't until we gathered signatures that council even started their development dialogue, at least talking about the issue, but we're kind of beyond talking about it. And Bill mentioned the money. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars in special interest money against this, and even before that, I was offered in the neighborhood of $30,000 personally if I would keep this off of the ballot. And that offer
Bill,
came,
you're shaking your head.
well, that offer came from Mayor Adam Paul through the Mayor Pro Tem. And we also discussed that in my kitchen. I'm sure he would admit to it. There are many people who have not even wanted us to vote on this.
Man, like many things, I'm happy to have people vote on this, because I think people can begin to see through the problems that are in this. The idea of someone offering you payment is something I've never heard of, and I can't imagine it, but setting that aside, the reality is, again, the reason we have so many groups, some are from outside of Lakewood, my group is not. The reason we have so many groups is because there are so many problems with this initiative. And, you know, in this short amount of time, we can't go through all of them, but the point is it's going to have a disastrous effect on basically building housing where it belongs, near transit and near jobs,
And you, because more on that housing issue, which we know is huge in Colorado, in every suburb, well, actually every city, I should say.
Yeah.
So how would this become a problem for affordable housing?
Well, the biggest piece of this is right now in a place like Lakewood, where your median income is $61,000, the reality is the median home price is about $411,000. The median single-family home is not an affordable home. Multifamily is how you're going to get for purchase and for rent affordable housing. So if we put limits to the ability to build them to where it's almost impossible to build them, this 40-unit vote requirement within this initiative, where it becomes a capricious political thing rather than a development plan, the comprehensive plan the city, members of the city, citizens voted on, that is the way in which we develop a city, not along political lines within a city council debate.
So what if the economy should turn? I know we're in a boom economy right now. What would that?
Well, that's why we need this oversight. That's why it's important to have this kind of initiative in place and this kind of ordinance in place, which is flexible. After 6 months, it is able to be changed. And I would beg that or argue that the oversight provided by council is what keeps this in the open. It's what keeps it transparent. Currently, the developer and the planning development assistance team meets behind closed doors to decide these large projects, and the plan, which Mr. Furman mentioned, our comprehensive plan that was put together with so many hours of community input, myself included, it has no oversight, and we have to have this oversight. And I think the larger issue is really the people, the development community, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep this off of the ballot, and people not even wanting us to vote on this.
All right, we have about 15 seconds left, so I'll let you have the last word here.
The idea that there is no oversight is not true. I invite anyone to look at the city's zoning, the city's zoning ordinance, and take a look when it's required to have city council votes, when it's required to have planning commission meetings, when it's required to have public meetings. They still exist. It's a false narrative to suggest there is no oversight. It exists.
Bill Furman, Kathy Kentner, thank you both for being here. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you very much.
And the vote is July 2nd, so we'll all be watching.
Thank
you very much.
Back in a moment.
So,